Welcome in, everybody, to a lot of bit of a bonus episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody's having a better day than I am. So we were not planning on going live here on a Tuesday night in June, early June. As a matter of fact, we were expecting to have Will Wade, head coach, NC State, joining us on the pod this evening. Then we just got late breaking news. Just days after the New York Knicks made the Eastern Conference Finals, lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, they have fired Tom Thibodeau. And as the resident dude that went to UConn, we got to talk about coaching candidates, specifically Dan Hurley. And I'll be honest, as a UConn fan, I am a little bit nervous. So everybody come on in. I said this on Twitter. If you've been waiting for Torres' downfall, if you have been waiting to see Torres just lose it on air, today is a good day for you to join this show. I never worried about the Lakers' job. This one I very much do. So everybody come on in. Before we get started, a couple quick things. One, make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Listen, we may have a lot of updates. We may have a UConn coaching search over the next couple weeks. So make sure that you are subscribed to YouTube. We started our College Hoops offseason grade series yesterday. So make sure to check out the Florida Gators. By the way, we have Will Wade, as I said, NC State head coach, later in the week as well. Off-season grades will continue. We actually may have pre-recorded UConn. That one may need a fresh coat of paint when it's all said and done. But make sure you're subscribed. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple and Spotify as well. Also, before we get started, one other quick announcement. You already know what it is. Our friends, our partners, our buddies, we want to thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Okay, so listen, I've told you all about this company, but Cauley Puffs, family-owned company, not far from where I live. The owner, Joey, is a huge sports fan, okay? He's sitting on the couch one day watching games, and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious. I need something that my kids are going to like, that I'm going to like, and he created Cauley Puffs, okay? This is the alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. You don't need the Doritos. You don't need the Fritos. All you need is Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is these things taste freaking delicious as well, okay? So don't take my word for it. This is what I need you to do. I need you to go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com. CauleyPuffs.com. You can also search Amazon.com as well. You can find them there. Search Amazon.com. Search Cauley Puffs. You'll find them there. Thank you to Cauley Puffs, our partners, our friends. Thank you for all that they do for the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it is all of a sudden a very busy Tuesday afternoon in sports. It's about 3:30 Eastern. We're going live. We have a great live audience. Drop your questions. Drop your super chats. But there is no more time to waste. Let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. So topic of the day, I think I just said it, but I happen to be pulling into the house. I'm not going to lie. I was actually stuck in traffic about 5 minutes from my house. Couldn't move. Pull up my social media feed, and I see that Tom Thibodeau, the head coach of the New York Knicks, is fired. And immediately I said, here we go again. Is Dan Hurley going to leave UConn in June for the NBA? Okay, so first of all, my first reaction is this. Okay, I've told you guys a million times, for people who aren't familiar with me, my background, what I do, in addition to this podcast, I host Fox Sports Radio every Saturday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern. It's a really fun shift because there's so many big things that happen in our time slot. And this past week, it just so happened that we came on right after the Eastern Conference Finals ended. Game 6 happens. The Indiana Pacers get blown out. And it was funny because my normal partner, Jason Martin, was out. And in his place, Olden Polynice, the longtime NBA player, was actually filling in. And as the show went on, we talked a lot about the Knicks. We talked a lot about the Pacers, previewed the NBA Finals, but we also just talked about the Knicks. And I said, do we think a change has to be made? And I think at first glance, the idea would be, no, they back-to-back 50-win seasons. Tom Thibodeau, this is the most success that this organization has ever had, made the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 1999 or 2000 or whatever it is. There's no way you fire Tom Thibodeau. But as I was working with Olden, I think the more that I leaned on him for his basketball knowledge, it really struck me that this might actually be in play, right? Because you think about it first glance. New York Knicks, 0% chance they're going to fire Tom Thibodeau. As a matter of fact, it's funny. I am on a UConn group chat. Shout out Coop, shout out Dusty for keeping me entertained in my UConn group chat. And I bring it up because all playoffs long, there has been no bigger fan of the New York Knicks than us, because we just want the Knicks to keep winning, put Dan Hurley in the rearview mirror, whatever. But coming out of the game on Saturday, what really stood out to me is if you break it down, it does sort of, I actually don't think, I might be the only person in the media, I don't think it's preposterous to fire Tom Thibodeau, because ultimately at the end of the day, two things stood out talking to Olden Polonies. One, I think the criticism of him always playing his veterans, always not using his bench, I think that's not only a valid criticism, but I think it's something every single year they wear down in the playoffs. And so, listen, this isn't a Knicks segment, it's a Dan Hurley conversation. But like bringing Tom Thibodeau back, he's actually way older than you think. He's like 67 years old, 62 years old. I mean, I thought he was like 55, 50, something like that. He's 67 years old, okay? So there's no way that the phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is there for a reason. You bring back Tom Thibodeau, he's not all of a sudden going to be playing 11 guys. He's going to be who he is. He's going to wear down Jalen Brunson. He's going to wear down Karl-Anthony Towns. And the next thing you know, you're going to be in the same situation a year from now, only you've wasted another year of Jalen Brunson's prime, another year of Karl-Anthony Towns' prime, and you're no closer to a championship. I actually thought this year, everything kind of broke their way, right? I know they were up 2 on the Celtics before Tatum gets hurt, but I mean, how many, we'll see with the Celtics when Tatum comes back, but like, how many years are you going to have that advantage over the Celtics? The Cavs lose in the round before. So the point I'm trying to make, everything kind of broke the best case scenario for the New York Knicks this year. And it still ended with them losing in the Eastern Conference Finals. And it still ended up with their players largely breaking down because of injury in the playoffs. And so ultimately, I guess I just wasn't that surprised when I saw the news that he was fired. I just thought it actually does kind of make sense, because when you look at Tom Thibodeau, he's not going to change. And so with it, I think comes the question that everybody wants to know. So let's go ahead and dive in. And that is Dan Hurley a candidate? And what I would say is, if you listen to this show a year ago, we can go back in a minute and talk about where I was, how I found out that Dan Hurley was interviewing with the Lakers. But I never thought he was a candidate for the Lakers. I never thought he was taking the job. Even when he was in LA, never for a second was I concerned. I'll be real. I'll be transparent. This one I'm a little bit worried about. Okay, so first of all, let's just break it down. Okay, why was I never worried about the Lakers? The reason I was never worried about, it never made sense. And I actually think that I was the first one to actually sniff out what was really going on. And I said it the day it happened. I said, the Lakers are about to hire JJ Redick, who's LeBron James's podcast buddy, and they're about to draft LeBron James's son. And so what I said was, the Lakers for basically the Lakers season ended like the first week in April. And then all of a sudden, the first week in June, there's this report from Woj, who I love, but it was just nonsense. Oh, Dan Hurley has quietly been one of their primary candidate. Well, Dan Hurley's been available to talk for 2 months, so why didn't you interview him? No. All along, it was a diversion because the Lakers wanted to hire LeBron James's podcast / wine drinking buddy, and they needed to look like they were doing a real interview process. I said, this organization is a mess. Dan Hurley's not a West Coast guy. None of it adds up. Oh, by the way, go back to Woj's initial report. There was some line about the Lakers are intrigued about Dan Hurley's development as they development skills as they welcome in Bronny James into the organization. I'm like, Dan Hurley does interviews where he says all sorts of stuff about, we recruit parents, not just players. And if you have a bad attitude, we don't want you. If your parents, it just never made sense. And so I woke up in Cabo on vacation, my final day, and I just said, it's never happening. It didn't, whatever. Well, fast forward, it is now, again, about an hour after the Tom Thibodeau news broke. And listen, I always say this stuff is always subject to change. We'll see what happens. By the time you listen to this, maybe there's a report that Dan Hurley isn't a candidate. By the way, drop that in the comment section if you're seeing that. But there's always the possibility that, like, maybe, just maybe, Dan Hurley isn't a candidate. But if the New York Knicks are interested in him, I do think this makes a ton of sense, because I had somebody ask me, well, why would he be a candidate this time but not last time? Or why would he be interested in this one, but not the Lakers? I think there's a couple very obvious reasons. One, obviously, I think the first one, the most important one, listen, I know there's some people in sports media that think like fit is an overrated thing. Oh, Nick Saban, he didn't fit in the SEC, and then he showed up and beat everybody. He's from West Virginia, coached at Michigan State. He didn't fit. Urban Meyer, whatever. I do think fit does matter. And I do think LA never made sense to me as a realistic landing spot for Dan Hurley a year ago when the Los Angeles Lakers job opened. Counter to that, where is Dan Hurley from? He's Jersey City. He's New York. He has a chip on his shoulder. He's not afraid to wear his emotions on his sleeve, okay? New Yorkers not only accept that, they embrace it. It's why I've said for a long time, I think Dan Hurley is the perfect candidate and perfect coach for UConn. He's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. UConn fans, I'm one of them. An alum, I'm one of them. We got a chip on our shoulder too. Connecticut, halfway between Boston, halfway between New York. Joe Rogan likes to say that Connecticut isn't a state. It's a freeway between Boston and New York. Yeah, you don't think that pisses people off from Connecticut? It sure does, okay? And so Dan Hurley has always been the perfect fit at UConn in a way that I don't think he would be at other places. Dan Hurley would not be the right fit at UCLA. Dan Hurley would not be the right fit at North Carolina. I know that Kentucky initially showed interest, but I think Kentucky fans and UConn fans would agree, Dan Hurley, Mark Pope's a great fit for Kentucky. Dan Hurley would have worked because Dan Hurley's really good, but Dan Hurley's a better fit at UConn. And so why I bring it up is because Dan Hurley isn't the right fit at a lot of places. Wouldn't be the right fit for the Miami Heat. Probably wouldn't be definitely not the right fit for the Lakers. I don't even know how many marquee jobs there are outside of a 2 or 3. I do think he makes sense for New York. He's from New York. He gets the culture. And I do think there is something about all of these guys. When you have reached a certain mountaintop in any individual profession, I think the immediate response is to kind of see what else is out there and kind of see what, if you can test yourself at the highest level, in another profession, right? So Nick Saban didn't leave LSU just because he wanted. I think he wanted to test himself at the highest level of football. Urban Meyer wanted to test himself at the highest level of football. Now, it didn't work out for those guys, but you can't blame themselves for testing themselves. And I don't think you can blame Dan Hurley if this is what he wants. But what I said when the Lakers stuff happened, and I truly believed it, I said there is only one job that I believe that Dan Hurley would actually leave UConn for, and that's the New York Knicks. Well, now the New York Knicks is open, and I think if he is offered or if he is contacted, I think he'd be interested. And listen, I'll say this, as someone who's aspirational, I wouldn't be mad at him. I would have been mad if he left for the Lakers because they were kind of a crap show. That's the other thing too. People are like, oh, well, it's the Lakers. It's LeBron. I mean, I remember having this conversation. People were like, you don't turn down the Lakers. You don't turn down LeBron. I'm like, why? Last 2 guys that had that job got fired. Like, Darvin Ham got fired a year after making the Western Conference Finals. The Knicks is different, though. I understand they just fired Tom Thibodeau, but this is different. This isn't going to a place where you have a 40-year-old superstar in the loaded West and where the superstar wants to control everything. Jalen Brunson just wants to hoop. He's in his prime. Karl Anthony Towns just wants to hoop. He's in his prime. He does play defense, but he wants to hoop. The Villanova guys are about culture. You can yell at them. You can be tough on them. It's not that big of a deal. And so to me, that's why it all makes sense. It's where he's from. He fits the culture. He fits the brand. I think the players fit him. I think the organization is in the right place where they can take that one final step, make the NBA finals, maybe win an NBA championship. And listen, I think there's a little bit of an ego to it as well, right? If Dan Hurley is the guy that leads the Knicks to an NBA title, guess what? He is the guy. He goes down in history forever. He has a statue outside of Madison Square Garden. Will it happen? Won't it happen? Will he even take doesn't matter. If he is the guy, there's a statue. There's no questions asked, and that's why I think he would have to consider if they were interested. Now, let's talk about if they're actually interested and what that would look like and what the next steps are. Now, why would they not be interested? Well, one, I think it's important to note there are other really good candidates out there. The first name, it was funny, the first name that got texted to me was not Dan Hurley, actually, believe it or not. You know what the first name that was texted to me was? It was actually Jay Wright. Like, I had a buddy of mine like, oh, do you think Jay Wright is a candidate here? Do you think Jay Wright would take this job? What do you think? Do you think Jay Wright would be the guy? And the logic and the argument behind it is obviously that, yes, Jay Wright is retired, but he's got all of his former players there, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, who's the third one, Josh Hart, and they kind of have that Villanova culture. They call them the Villanova Knicks. And so Jay Wright says he's retired. I've said forever that Jay Wright is never coaching college basketball again. If he wouldn't even listen to Kentucky, if he didn't come back to coach Villanova after they fired Kyle Neptune, I don't think he's ever coaching college basketball again. But he's only in his early 60s. And these NBA head coaching jobs are not 20-year commitments. Like, it's, hey, we have a window with this group of guys. Would you be interested in coming back and coaching them? And so to me, Jay Wright actually, I think in some ways makes the most sense out of any candidate possible, right? I mean, this is a guy that right now is only 63 years old, which is crazy to me because, you know, this is a guy, now he'll turn 64 later in the year, but he's been around forever, but he also feels very young. And so when I think about Jay Wright, I kind of think about something that I talked about a while ago. If you remember, do you remember, by the way, I had this, producer Matt made me this frame that I should have been using this whole time. But, you know, I remember there was like a report when Nebraska fired Scott Frost that like, oh, Urban Meyer could be interested. And people were like, Urban Meyer's not coming back to college. It's like, Urban Meyer at the time was like 58, 59 years old. And I was like, you think Urban Meyer is just going to sit on his couch and do nothing for the next 20 years until he dies? That's not the way that he's wired. And so I don't know if Urban Meyer is going to come back, but I kind of feel the same way with Jay Wright. For people just joining us, we're talking about Jay Wright's candidacy. He's 63 years old. These NBA jobs are not 15, 20-year commitments. He doesn't have to coach till he's 80. Jalen Brunson is what, 28, 29 years old? I mean, Jalen Brunson has a 3-4 year shelf life on him being a superstar, right? He was born in 96, so that means that he is 28. He'll be 29 in August. What does Jalen Brunson have, like a 4-year window here to win a title as the best player on your team? Karl Anthony Towns is right around the same age. And so Jay Wright actually makes sense to me because he's a Northeast guy. He's coached all of those guys, and I do think he has the temperament for the NBA. So he is a guy that I think is very much a candidate. I would also say this. I do wonder, Mike Malone, former NBA championship winning head coach, Mike Malone, coach of the Denver Nuggets, he's available. I don't know what the Knicks are going to do, but I'll say this. Independent of Dan Hurley, do I want him to leave UConn? Do I not want him to leave UConn? What I would say is if the Knicks fire Tom Thibodeau and they don't get any of those three guys, it's a disastrous decision. It's a terrible decision because you have to get somebody who you know, Thibs got him this far. You got to get a guy that you believe can get him to the next level. I think Jay Wright can do that. I think Mike Malone can do that. And I do hate to say it, I think Dan Hurley can do that. Now, what I will say about Dan Hurley, this is interesting, and I'm not trying to be negative, and I'm not trying to be UConn guy, and I'm not trying to say that Dan Hurley isn't a candidate, but there are a couple variables. One, it is worth noting two things. UConn's players did report back to campus on Saturday and Sunday and had their first workout on Monday, okay? Could mean nothing. Could mean zero. Could have zero impact at all. But if you remember, I think that was part of the struggle with Dan Hurley last year, if he ever even considered the Lakers job, is like, it's one thing to, it's one thing for an NBA team to fire their head coach in April. And in April, you take a job, and then from there, all your players can enter the portal, find a landing spot, this, that, the other thing, and your assistant coaches can get good jobs as well. The opposite of that is getting a job offer right now. It's June. Yes, your players could enter the portal, but it's like, is there a great landing spot for guys at this time as opposed to maybe in March or April when the portal opened? Is the money that they're going to make at UConn there in another spot? Is the role going to be there? And then does UConn open the coaching search and try to hire another coach, or do they hire from within? Does your whole staff get screwed? I don't know. And so you have to wonder, starting practice, Alex Caravan, all these guys deciding to come back, does that play a role in Dan Hurley's decision? The other thing I would say, and I know people are going to say, oh, Torres, you're just trying to make up excuses. I was thinking about this. I feel like the Dan Hurley brand has taken a little bit of a hit over the last year or so. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But this was a guy that got a technical foul at the worst possible time against Memphis, cost UConn a game. This is a guy that caught mouthing, I'm the best effing coach in this sport, don't you walk away from me, to a ref. This is a guy that, is chirping with fans. And as a UConn guy, I love it. And as a UConn guy, I'm going to defend it. But now he's the face of a $1 billion organization. Now Jalen Brunson, as a grown man, has to go to the podium and explain his coach's behaviors. So I think there's the possibility that, is the stock quite as hot as it was a year ago? Then I think there's all the other variables of just, you heard my way too early top 25 a few days ago. I think UConn's a top 6-7 team coming into this year. And I think Dan Hurley would have a chance to win another championship. But the counter to that is, I don't think the Knicks job is ever going to be more attractive than it is now. So listen, I'm doing this in real time. It is 3:52 Eastern time. Feel like I probably should have just waited until like the normal 6 o'clock Eastern to do this show. We probably would have gotten a better audience, but I wanted to get this out quickly. I wanted to share some thoughts. And as I always say, this stuff is always subject to change. Okay. So hypothetically, by the time you listen to this, there may be a report that Dan Hurley's not a candidate. Dan Hurley may put out a statement that says, I'm not a candidate. Dan Hurley may put out a tweet from practice saying, only place I want to be. Mike Malone might get hired tonight. I don't know. I'm just basically reacting in real time because that's my job and that's my responsibility to this audience. And it's a responsibility that I take seriously. So the Knicks job is open. Dan Hurley may or may not be available. Yeah. Really quickly, we do have a couple comments in the chat. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see here. Okay, so Jacob asked a really good question. So Jacob is our resident UConn fan, and he asks, Hurley to the Knicks. No, that's not the one I was looking for. Where is it? Torres. If Hurley takes the job, does Luke go with him? So Luke Murray, of course, is the lead assistant at UConn. Him and Kamani Young are basically the co-lead assistants, if you will. Luke Murray was the guy, if you remember, that Dan Hurley was at the Bruce Springsteen? I want to say it was Bruce Springsteen. The Bruce Springsteen concert remember when he was supposed to be interviewing with the Lakers, then he shows up at a Bruce Springsteen concert at Madison Square Garden. Luke Murray was with him. Now, I think what would be interesting listen, this is something, I haven't talked to Dave Benedict, the UConn AD, about it. But I would assume after last year, I would assume that Dave Benedict has been planning for the possibility that Dan Hurley could be linked to NBA head coaching jobs. And I think, it would have to be decided pretty quickly. Are we promoting from within and trying to retain what we have, or are we going outside and trying to hire somebody outside the family? Because I think if you do the traditional coaching search, then I think Luke Murray just says, screw it, I'm going to the NBA with Dan Hurley. Now, if you say right away, Luke Murray, Luke, it's like, Luke, you are my father. Like, Luke, you are the next head coach of UConn basketball. Then my hunch is that I think he would take that job in a heartbeat. I don't think he would think twice about it. Now, is he ready to be the head coach? Is he the right guy for the job? That's another conversation for another day. The question is, would Luke Murray go with Dan Hurley to the NBA? I think if Dave Benedict made it obvious very quickly, I believe that Luke Murray would probably be that next head coach at UConn. But if you keep people waiting, you keep people with options waiting, I think there's a good chance that he would look elsewhere. Really quickly, Snake Oil Salesman says, Jay Wright swears he doesn't want to coach anymore. Listen, there's a lot of things a lot of people don't want to do that when given the perfect opportunity, you take advantage of them. By the way, I got some dumb comments on other social media platforms. So, Snake Oil Salesman says, Jay Wright swears he doesn't want to coach anymore. Yeah, he probably doesn't want to. I know he doesn't want to coach college. Like I said, if he wouldn't even pick up a call from Kentucky when John Calipari left, if he had no interest in coaching at Villanova, then he's done coaching college. But coaching in the NBA, another probably 5-year, $30 million, 5-year, $40 million deal to try and win an NBA championship. I don't think it's preposterous. And it's coaching guys and it's coaching guys that are going to be receptive to your coaching style, right? Jay Wright, listen, don't let the fancy suits and the smile and the charm fool you. Jay Wright gets after you. He'll to quote the old Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, Jay Wright will give you an ass chewing if you get on his wrong side. And so I only bring it up because with Jay Wright, like, you got to know that if you're going to the NBA, you can coach the way you want to coach. And this is probably the only scenario where you know that you'll be able to coach the way you want to coach. The other thing with Jay Wright, he's basically a Northeast guy. It's almost like Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley to the Lakers never made sense for me. I think even if this same core, if Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, and Josh Hart were on like the Atlanta Hawks or the Houston Rockets, I don't think that job makes sense for Jay Wright, the Charlotte Hornets, whatever, New Orleans Pelicans. But New York City, a city that you're familiar with, a place that you're familiar with, I don't think it's 0% for Jay Wright, just like I don't think it's a 0% chance for Dan Hurley. So I know Jay Wright has said he doesn't want to coach, but you never know. You just never know. Let's see what else. What else we got? Let's see. Snake Oil Salesman says Cal, Wright, or Hurley will be one of the next head coaches. The John Calipari link, obviously, Leon Rose and Worldwide West are two high-profile friends of his. Cal, I haven't really given much thought to. I think Arkansas is his last job, and I think Arkansas gave him a lot. I could be crazy. I get the sense that Cal is actually enjoying himself at Arkansas. I think the first 6 months were a little bumpy. I'll be real. I'll say it in this safe space that is the Aaron Torres pod. I don't think he wanted to be there to begin with. I think that night at Rupp probably changed just about everything, where I think he's like, okay, this is my job now. I took this job. We got to roll. I got to do this. And it feels like he is enjoying himself much more going forward as the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. He was he's doing all sorts, he did the goofy welcome back video. I met with the team. There actually was a team. He's doing his tour of all the NBA teams, whatever. I could be wrong. I could be wrong on Cal. I don't think Cal has as much of a desire to coach in the NBA as possible. Now, what I will say, he used to use the NBA often to leverage Kentucky for more stuff. The difference between Kentucky and Arkansas, remember, Kentucky, he didn't like Mitch Barnhart, the AD. Arkansas, John Tyson is basically who he reports to. Shout out the Chicken Man. And I think he's got a pretty good relationship with John Tyson. I don't think he's sneaking out the side door on John Tyson. Let's get to a couple other questions. We'll get out of here. Let's see here. All right. First of all, shout out Mike, who is calling Mike Nardi Denardi. So Mike Nardi comes from Villanova as an assistant coach. Mike says Murray and Kamani bumped up. Denardi also there now. So I think what he's trying to say is Luke Murray would get the head coach. Kamani Young would be the associate head coach. Mike Nardi, not Denardi, would also get a bump. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I don't want to get into too many hypotheticals. What would happen at UConn right now? I think they would promote internally. I don't know if that's the right or wrong decision. I'm just telling you what off the top of my head I think they would do. I think at this time last year, I think they would have seriously considered doing an outside coaching search. I think this year it's like, bro, we got a championship team. We wait even 72 hours, we could lose everybody. We wait 72 hours to make phone calls, we could lose everybody. So I would hope that Dave Benedict, the AD, has a group of names in his desk and kind of has an idea, would this guy take the job if Dan Hurley takes the job? I think if you're waiting until Dan Hurley accepts the New York Knicks job, again, assuming that he is a candidate, I think if you're waiting for him to take the job to see what happens, you are waiting way, way, way too long. I think he has to, I think Dave Benedict has to go to bed tonight knowing if Dan Hurley is interested in this job, if Dan Hurley takes this job, am I promoting from within? And if I'm not, I need to start figuring out who are realistic candidates for this job. All right, drop any last minute questions and I'm going to get out of here. We want to make it a quick reaction. Yeah, so Jacob brings up a good point on the Luke Murray, Kamani stuff. Kamani is already the associate head coach. I don't think Kamani would necessarily be first in line to get the head coaching job. Do with that information what you want, as my light is about to go down. I think Luke Murray would probably realistically be the next call. It's called a strong hunch. Tell you what, I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres pod. Snake Oil Salesman says Mike Nardi is a name I haven't heard in forever. He was a scrappy guard. Yeah, he played at Villanova under Jay Wright. He was an assistant under Jay Wright, and then he was an assistant under Kyle Neptune. And when that coaching staff left, Mike Nardi when that coaching staff, when Kyle Neptune was fired, Mike Nardi became available. For people who don't know the backstory on UConn, Mike Nardi came to UConn, and then longtime assistant Tom Moore became UConn basketball's GM. All right. That's 30 minutes on the Knicks, 30 minutes on Tom Thibodeau, 30 minutes on Dan Hurley. If you're not subscribed to the pod, do me a favor. Please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres pod. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. Hey, do your boy Torres a favor. Do your boy Torres a solid. Go ahead and download some of the, go ahead to the podcast feed, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to do me a favor, you can download the episodes there as well, because we have plenty going on there. Do me a favor. Also, give me a quick like on that little button there, the little thumbs up button. That really does actually go a long way. I would appreciate your support on that as well. But yeah, tell you what, we got a very interesting story here on a Tuesday in June. We'll keep you posted if there's any new updates. But until then, I think we're going to go ahead and get out of here. That's all for that episode of the pod. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel. It's my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. JJ's got a job. Does Dan Hurley. We'll discuss that. We'll keep tabs. We'll see if there are any updates going forward. Appreciate you joining me on this quick edition of the Aaron Torres pod. By the way, Wednesday night, assuming there's no updates on this story or anything else, Will Wade will join us on Wednesday night. Love Coach Wade.